The leak didn't trace back to the palace. It didn't come from a royal aide. It originated from an unexpected place, a therapist, and it quietly shook the public's perception of Meghan Markle. On the morning of July 20, 2025, a secured MI6 communication circulated through a confidential internal network. It wasn't linked to a covert operation or intelligence probe. Rather, it was a detailed psychological report note submitted not by Meghan herself, but by a licensed trauma therapist who had treated her over a span of nearly 3 years. Citing security concerns, the therapist shared anonymized session logs that captured Meghan's inner world marked by anxiety, distrust, and fear. One quote, highlighted in red in the MI6 briefing, stood out. She said it again last week. "If Kate keeps rising, I'll never be free. I need her gone in every way." The 14 words triggered an escalation inside British intelligence. This was more than personal rivalry. It reflected a clinical profile of growing psychological risk. The platform that first exposed this wasn't a gossip blog or royal commentator. It was royal scope intel, unfiltered. The idea that Meghan's own therapist had shared observations with MI6 was startling, and the words "needed Kate gone" added a darker dimension. The therapist's notes extended beyond a single phrase. Over 12 pages of clinical observations mapped recurring themes: intense concern over public opinion, resentment about comparisons to Princess Diana, and unease about Kate's popularity. A comment flagged by an MI6 analyst read, "She believes if Harry doesn't win the power narrative, she loses herself." This wasn't merely conflict, it was identity erosion. Within those logs, Kate appeared not just as a family member, but as a perceived existential threat. From an MI6 summary dated July 20, 2025, subject demonstrates patterns of displacement and projection. Consistently views Catherine as symbolic of lost control and influence over personal narrative. Evidence of attempts to undermine. In London, key personnel were briefed. The palace was discreetly informed. No public announcements were made, but behind the scenes, the implications were being weighed. Eventually, the silence cracked, not from an official statement, but from an insider with access to the analysis. And as with all digital trails, even deleted documents can be recovered. Supporting the leak became a mission for someone of them, a former MI6 linguist, now in private cybersecurity. She had helped assess the therapist logs for behavioral indicators, but partway through the review, she took a risk. She captured an image and passed it to a former BBC investigative producer. The image revealed a section highlighted in blue by MI6. It read, "She said the only way to make her brand immune was to make Kate untouchable by force if necessary." No act of violence was directly mentioned, but the phrasing was enough to raise serious alarms. The concern wasn't just obsession, it was escalation. Former BBC correspondent Clive Burns issued a quiet statement. "There's a reason this didn't come from Buckingham. This goes beyond rivalry. It touches on national security." As the leak spread, Kensington Palace insiders confirmed that Kate had been briefed and was reportedly disturbed by the nature of the language used. Though the palace withheld public comment, royal analyst Lady Evelyn Bram made a rare radio appearance, stating bluntly, "This is no longer a personal feud, it's a matter of accountability." That statement soon trended across platforms. Fake quote. July 18, 2025. Lady Evelyn Bram, LBC. "When one woman speaks about needing another eliminated, not just removed, but erased, it becomes dangerous to ignore." Following that broadcast, more excerpts from the therapist's log surfaced. In a note from April 2025, Meghan reportedly said, "They want her to be queen. That can't happen. If she becomes untouchable, I become irrelevant." MI6 categorized this as catastrophic thinking. The word untouchable appeared repeatedly across 5 documented sessions. To Meghan, Kate represented something unchangeable, therefore, something to neutralize. And perhaps most troubling of all were not the emotional responses, but the apparent forethought. The therapist recorded multiple sessions where Meghan rehearsed statements for future media interviews should her dispute with Kate ever escalate. These weren't vague responses. They were carefully composed narratives designed to preserve public sympathy. One entry dated March 4, 2025 read, "Client practiced phrasing for future PR scenario. I only ever wanted to protect my peace." Another noted alternative wording, "Some people couldn't handle seeing me thrive." MI6 flagged these entries not because of media planning but because they were unprompted. No known external trigger existed at the time. The sessions suggested preemptive strategy, not reaction. UK. Trauma psychologist Dr. Cynthia Harold weighed in, "When someone rehearses a defense long before there's an accusation, it's not self-protection, it suggests calculated framing." Then came the session that shifted the case from behavioral study to something else entirely, one that reframed everything. What began as a clinical assessment gradually escalated to a national security concern. On May 8, 2025, Meghan Markle reportedly told her therapist, "There are ways to make someone break without ever touching them. All you have to do is flood the air around them." Whisper campaigns, pressure points, silence in the right places. Within hours, the quote was escalated through MI6 internal risk channels. It mirrored a digital activity pattern already under active review. Coordinated smear accounts attacking Kate Middleton as a public persona targeting her parenting, mental wellness, and even vocal delivery. While no direct link was established, the congruence between the language and digital tactics was considered highly suspicious. MI6 Psychological Risk Memo, May 2025. Subject exhibits acute understanding of reputational attrition and sustained psychological pressure deployment. Parliament was soon made aware. Internal discussions began questioning the legal limits of therapeutic confidentiality in cases with potential implications for national perception and individual safety. Among the first to speak publicly was Dame Harriet Messon, former Deputy Commissioner for Ethical Justice, stating during a televised roundtable, "We must recognize when therapy becomes the staging ground for covert narrative engineering. This transcends gossip." Internal analysts drew parallels to corporate sabotage tactics, the only difference being that this occurred within the royal sphere. MI6 requested expanded access to the therapist's complete documentation. By this stage, what had begun as passive observation had shifted toward strategic intelligence mapping. Kate, meanwhile, remained unaware of the scale unfolding around her. An internal note, dated June 29, 2025, and attributed to a senior palace aide, captured the gravity. The princess mistook the quiet for emotional distance. She didn't realize it was calculated strategy. Kate had maintained a deliberate avoidance of media theatrics. She declined to respond to past public accusations, abstained from engaging in social media, and focused on her family and ceremonial role. However, according to the notes leaked from Meghan's sessions, that silence was interpreted as an existential threat. One repeated line appeared 4 separate times. "She thinks silence makes her saintly. I can't beat someone who pretends not to play." Royal Ethics Surveillance Note. Meghan perceived Kate's non-engagement not as neutrality, but as narrative dominance and, therefore, something to dismantle. Even more troubling were longer-term implications outlined in the therapist's logs. In a session dated February 12, 2025, Meghan allegedly stated, "Once I've won America's heart, the UK will have no choice. They'll rewrite the story in real time, and she'll be the one who looks petty." This wasn't merely reactive, it was a long-horizon strategy. The plan appeared centered not only on enhancing Meghan's profile, but also incrementally degrading Kate's public reputation. Fabricated quote, MI6 analyst entry. February 2025. Subject exhibits fixation with narrative reconstruction, views character diminishment of secondary figure Catherine as essential to perceived justice arc. Concurrently, MI6 Cyber Division, specifically Project Sapphire, an unofficial behavioral mapping initiative, cross-referenced phrasing from the therapy notes against social media activity. The results raised additional red flags. Multiple high-engagement accounts posting anti-Kate content used the same terminology as recorded in session logs, including the now infamous phrase, "I stole Queen." This repetition suggested strategic alignment, not coincidence. Crown Leaks. Briefing. 3 major accounts critical of Kate ceased posting after direct contact from Project Sapphire. Inquiry ongoing. Prince William was briefed shortly after, not by a palace aide, but directly by MI6. His reported response, as documented in a private session note, reflected the gravity. Fabricated quote, Prince William, MI6 briefing, July 10, 2025. "If someone is using mental health discourse as a cover to systematically dismantle my wife's public standing, this stops being personal. It becomes prosecutable. Up until this point, all materials under examination were therapists, documentation notes, and summaries. That changed on July 9, 2025, when 4 audio files arrived in London under diplomatic seal, transported from California by courier. These were legal liability backups of therapy sessions, typically inaccessible unless subpoenaed or voluntarily submitted. Their contents pushed the investigation into a new phase. One recording captured Meghan stating, "If Harry still loved his family, I wouldn't have to protect us like this. I'm not trying to hurt Kate, I'm trying to survive her." The tone was emotional, guarded but defensive, asserting self-preservation over direct hostility. Another file, dated May 2, 2025, contained the following phrase, "They made her untouchable by hiding her flaws. I'll make her touchable again with 1,000 cuts." UK Security Internal Dispatch. MI6 confirmed secure possession of audio files tied to Meghan Markle's therapy sessions. Pending verification, a parliamentary panel is expected to convene to assess the balance between therapeutic privacy and emerging national interest threats.